What's up, everybody? Hey, I'm sorry that if you were watching the other stream that I intended to have live, that you missed it. I don't know what was going on. I could not figure out how to get that thing to actually stream, even though it was showing that I was streaming. So, apologies for that. There were some questions there that may not have, well, I know they didn't transfer over here. So, if you had those questions, please feel free to ask. I just wanted to kind of take a little bit of time today and talk about some some things, some questions that you might have, questions that I have, that kind of stuff. One question I did see that I thought was really cool was it was basically saying, yeah, I like the idea for doing a budget friendly system, that the video that I just posted yesterday. But the question was asked, and other people asked, this is why I'm bringing this up, if I would do it for higher priced tiers. And yeah, I would. I think my question to you all would be, what prices would you like to see? Because let me back up a little bit. The video that I just released yesterday, I talked about 3 different systems. And I put the max budget at around $1,000. And the reason I chose those 3 different systems or 3 different speakers is because those are ones that I have my own experience with. I left a couple out because I didn't want it to be confusing. That video was meant for the newcomer, the newbie. And I didn't want them to go in and watch a video that had 5 different suggestions and now they're confused. Like, I came here for advice on what I should get to start with. Where do I start? The other thing was the subwoofer discussion. A couple of people in the comments section had asked for me to go a little bit deeper into equalization and subwoofer integration. And the reason that I didn't go deep into that was because that could have been a very long video. I've got, this thing, okay? This is a 5 microphone array. If I wanted to make a video about using in-room measurements to set up your subwoofer in the best possible way, that'd be an undertaking. That will be an undertaking. And one day I'll do that. And honestly, I've been thinking about maybe just doing that live. And that way you can watch me mess things up and you can see kind of the thought pattern. Editing something like that is really what I don't look forward to doing. Editing stuff, my brain is so scattered so much of the time that it's hard for me to take on a project like that and then edit it down and answer everything that I feel like needs to be answered. And then there's the other aspect of I've got to make everybody happy. It seems like no matter what I do, even the people that I think would be psyched on the video content that I create, they have something negative to say. And I'm not whining. I'm just saying, like, I'm giving you some background information. When I do these videos, specifically the one yesterday about a beginner's system under about $1,000, I chose that setup. I specifically said, use your phone app to equalize the response down and bring the modal issues down. I did that because do you really think that somebody new is going to understand how to use REW, understand how to use a U mic, understand how to use a multi-microphone array? They're not. So we got to get them in. We got to say, got you. Come on. And then 6 months down the line, what can I do now? And can I do this? And now we've got the hooks in them. I say it like we're trying to hook them. But that's how I got involved in the hobby. It started off with just a CD player, and then it started off with subwoofers, and then it started off with a 4-channel amplifier, 4 fronts and rears in my car. And then it started off running active, and then I took that and I brought it over to DIY home audio, building my own speakers, doing transmission line full range drivers, doing coaxial drivers with a KEF drive unit in between, 3-way, using ScanSpeak 10-inch mid-bass driver, learning about the Allison effect, measuring the actual response outdoors, trying to figure out, do I place 2 of these SB Acoustics 10-inch subwoofer, not subwoofers, mid-bass drivers, basically, either they're 8-inch ceramic drivers on the side of the speaker, or do I use 1 10-inch and put it low down? Measuring all that stuff. That's how I got into this. And I think when you're trying to attract people who want to learn a little bit more, You don't just hit them over the head with a shovel and inundate them with a bunch of information that they're probably not going to use and then they're just going to check out on. You bring something that is tangible to them that they can use and they can get started with, and then they start asking the other questions. And that's how you build a community. You don't build a community by just throwing a bunch of word diarrhea or word salads at them and hoping that you impress them with your intellect and your knowledge of audio. And again, that's not how it works. I'm just speaking from experience here. So that's why I specifically went after the more easily accessible to the newcomer information, like using your phone to RTA, to RTA the interim response, and using the one band of EQ to bring something down. I don't care if it's a third octave. I don't care if it's one octave. It doesn't have to be 1/24th octave, because with that, they're going to have to go pay more money. They're already on a budget. They're not going to go out and buy a microphone. I don't think they will. If you disagree, that's fine, but I'm just saying. So that's where I come from with doing a lot of these videos and doing a lot of these topics. And you're trying to appease both sides, like the newcomer and the hardcore enthusiast. And the newcomer is like, "Oh, you're giving me too much information." And the hardcore enthusiast is saying, "Well, you said this thing wrong." And it's really getting to the level of nitpicking. And frankly, as a community, that level of nitpicking is really what bothers me, because I would rather us say, here's a suggestion, rather than saying, "Well, you left out this specific thing." It's like, I mean, maybe I did it on purpose. I don't know. So, yeah, I just kind of want to get that off of my chest. I've been dealing with that for like 2 weeks, and I just don't understand people sometimes. And it really is frustrating. I'm just being honest. I've been doing this for, I don't know, so 2004, 2005 was when I got into audio, started DIYing my own systems in around 2006. No, yeah, 2006. Built my first subwoofer enclosure, learned about Basebox Pro, Win ISD. And then it went on from there. And like I say, that's where you've got to learn. That's where you've got to get your passion from, is from the ground up. I don't think you can just instill a passion in somebody by saying, "Go out and spend $20,000 on these things, and then I'm going to teach you how to use REW." To me, that's not how you organically bring up a passion. So anyway, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. Maybe it gives you an idea of where I'm coming from. Corey Page, thank you for the $5 super chat, man. I appreciate that. There was a huge buzz around Dirac art last year, but it seems like the major outlets shelved their planned reviews. Have you heard anything about art? I haven't. I mean, I've heard about it. I listened to a system locally that used art, and so it was a home theater set up in a business, AVIQ in Huntsville, Alabama. They told me that they were running art. It sounded good. They weren't using any room treatment, no bass traps, no nothing. It was just 4 walls. And it sounded pretty dang good, I got to say. I mean, I didn't do an extended listening session. I heard a little bit of one of the Eagles live, the new Eagles live with Vince Gill. But yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. To me, I think that was a good showing for my first experience with art. But outside of that, I don't really have any experience with art. Maybe one day I'll get a hold of something like that, though. Mark, is there anything between the Weam and the NAD 3045 that includes bass management plus high pass filter? I got to be honest, man. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sure that there probably is, but I just don't know the answer to that question. If you have a low dependent Class D amp that affects the frequency response, can that be EQ'd out? I think so. Yes. The problem is, how do you know what to EQ out, right? So with that Weam amp, it is load dependent, but it's also $300. And I didn't like that it was load dependent. I took the time to mention that it's load dependent, but I also said that it's $300, and it does a lot of other things that are really good. And it does have EQ. So theoretically, if you wanted to, you could go in and EQ out some of those issues. In a better world, that wouldn't have any load dependency, but it does. And yes, you can EQ out, but how are you going to know what to EQ out without having that information? You would basically have to hook up that speaker. You'd have to get anechoic data for that speaker without a load dependent amp, and then anechoic data for that speaker with a load dependent amp to figure out where you need to place the equalization. In the grand scheme of things, I'm a little bit torn, because part of me thinks it's not a big enough deal given all the other things that you get for $300. But at the same time, how do you know what to EQ when you don't know exactly what that amplifier is contributing to the overall timbre tonality of that speaker? So I'm a little bit torn, to be honest, but I'm still looking at the fact that this thing is a good barrier to entry into the hobby and to get people started off with. And I think that the pros outweigh that con. When you do compression to anechoic SPLs, how does that convert to a typical in room? So the answer really is that your room is going to do whatever. So I don't know the answer to what your room is going to contribute. Really, I'm just focused on what the speaker itself is doing as you increase the output, and is the output changing as you increase the volume? Because that isn't going to change in the room unless maybe you hit some kind of I don't know. Maybe if you hit some kind of certain SPL that would cause a panel in your room to vibrate at enough output that would overcome the SPL of your speakers, or be distracting, but then that's a separate thing altogether. Anechoic compression testing is anechoic compression testing. It's for that speaker, and whatever the room does, the room is going to do regardless of that compression. Um, the thing that might be interesting to consider, though, is at lower volume. Let me think here, where you have no issue with compression versus higher volume where maybe you're losing about 2 dB at 50 hertz. Maybe that causes something to rattle less. I don't know. Uh, I don't. I don't know though. I think I'm kind of just reaching there, to be honest with you. What do you think about crossover points, and how does it change the tonality of a speaker? I found speakers with low crossover points, such as 1500 hertz, seem to sound smaller and sharper. That could be the case. If it's got a lower crossover point, then presumably, all things being equal, it acts more as a point source. And if you watch my video about bigger speakers, bigger sound, I'm coming from the perspective of crossover implementation in relatively inexpensive tower speakers. And tower speakers, because they're bigger physically, they have more drivers. Poor crossover implementation is going to have more phase issues. So it's going to sound less coherent. It's going to sound more diffuse. And that may come off as sounding larger. I have personal experience with this. I've designed enough crossovers and loudspeakers that, at least DIY loudspeakers, and let me back that up. I've screwed up enough crossovers in DIY loudspeakers where you can hear the shift in vocals from at the tweeter to at the midwoofer, and it's a phase issue. It's a crossover implementation issue. So that speaker may actually sound larger because it's more diffuse, but a speaker with the correct crossover is going to sound more like a point source. The latter is what I think is more important. Now, if we take that subject and we say, all right, forget about the crossover implementation, and we just talk about the sheer size of the speaker and how it's going to illuminate different characteristics in the room, it's going to activate different modes than a speaker placed at certain height. Now you've got speaker with distributed woofers from high to low. That is going to change the overall sound in the room, and it's going to sound different for sure. Whether or not it's going to sound larger, I think, is another matter. But it's something that's worth considering, and I do hope to maybe do a follow-up video on that with a particular guest who designs pro audio line arrays for concerts. And he thought that was an interesting video that I made, and he has some counters to it. So I'm hoping that he can come on and we can have that discussion sometime in the next month or so. He's actually on the road right now. Have you ever had the opportunity to look at the CSS Crichton 1TDX and get your thoughts? I know when I was taking the night shift with little ones, I kept on going back to the Randy video and those components. Is that the tower speaker? Let me see here. Um, if it is, then I have talked about that before. Oh, it's not. Okay. I have not. And if anybody's curious, let me see if I can show this to you real fast. Screen, entire screen. Okay. This is the speaker that we're discussing right now. CSS Crichton 1TDX. You can buy this in kit form, or you can buy it complete if you want. I don't have personal experience with that particular speaker. I do have experience with a tower speaker, but it was short-lived because it showed up damaged and I had to send it back. Let's see here. Marv, Numi have the active BS5 with HDMI ARC for 170. I didn't even know. Yeah, I've actually got to pair those in to review. That's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see how those turn out. Might be a game changer. Hey, I just learned about the Audio Tools app. Can you talk a little bit about how RT60 works on the app? So for that app, I'm not really sure. I can talk about in relation to REW. Basically, RT60 is the time that it takes the sound to stop reverberation to some degree within 60 seconds, 60 milliseconds, something, or 60 decibels down. That's what it is. I believe, and this varies depending on what source you read. So I would probably go to some trusted commercial installer for this information to get their opinion. And probably, I'm sure it's written in the book, Floyd Tool Sound Reproduction book. But the numbers that I've seen are for a room, you want them to be about, is it a quarter of a second? So 0.25 milliseconds to 0.3 milliseconds for like a standard sized room. I think a half a second is on the higher side of things, and lower than a quarter of a second is considered possibly too dead. Matt Pose, I think, has a good video on this. Matthew Pose, if you guys want to YouTube his page and look. I'll be honest with you, when it comes to RT60, though, that's not really my forte. I haven't messed with that stuff in years. So I'm just shooting you straight here. Let's see here. Hello from Lansing, Michigan. What's up? Thought that was a very useful video yesterday. I appreciate that. Looking for front towers that would work well with Onkyo 7100 no amp pre-outs. No amp pre. Oh, okay. Was looking at the Ascend ELX Titan towers or Revel 226. I don't have experience with the Ascend. I do have experience with the Revel. The Revel is an awesome speaker. I would gladly own it. And I will leave it at that. Ascend, Dave from Ascend makes really good stuff, but I don't know about that particular speaker. I don't have any insight to that one right now. Maybe that'll change in the future, though. Hello from the Netherlands. Hello from the Alabama in the United States. Let's see here. I'd be very interested to see your own process for sub integration. It doesn't need to be a tutorial. Those can be found elsewhere. Yeah, so when I move, I'm going to try to cover some of this information about setting up subwoofer, probably 2 subwoofers in a room, how to phase the line at the crossover. Because, man, subwoofer integration can be extremely hard to do depending on your requirements. If you could put the subwoofers close to the speaker, that makes integration a lot easier. But if you have to put the subwoofers like 6 feet away from your speaker in corners, that makes the subwoofer integration really hard. You can get levels and things like that pretty well dialed in, but at the crossover, you care about the phase, and you really need a way to measure the phase, and you can do that for free with REW and a microphone. But it's a process, and I personally don't have a step-by-step tutorial that will say step 1, 2, 3, you're done, right? For me, when I'm integrating a subwoofer, it's playing test tones, it's doing sweeps, it's listening, and it's measuring. And in order to get where I want to get, I also have to understand that I'm going to have to compromise somewhere. In most rooms, you're going to be completely in phase at maybe 80 hertz, but you may be a little bit out of phase at 70 hertz, or a little bit more out of phase at 60 hertz. You may have to do some overlap with your mains in terms of crossover. You may want to do some underlap with your mains in terms of crossover. And so it's not a one size fits all solution. I think when it comes to that, it really does require trial and error, and you need to understand how to read the graphics, but you also need to take the time to sit down in your seat and listen. And I find personally that not listening to music, that seriously listening to test tones there's an app called Signal Gen, at least for the iPhone, and sweeping the test tones is a really good and quick way to find the areas that need more attention. I'm not saying you should sit down and listen to test tones in lieu of music all the time, But in the process of setting up a crossover with your subs to your mains, music is so diverse in its frequencies. I mean, you may have a kick drum at 55 hertz, you may have another one at 40 hertz. I mean, it's going to depend. And so trying to get that perfect blend with music, you're going to be there for hours and days. And what's going to wind up happening is you're going to set up a tune and you're going to like it. And then you're going to listen to another song and you're going to say, whoa, why does that bass thump not hit me in the chest? Why does it hit me in my butt? Well, because it's out of phase at that frequency. Now, what is that frequency? Well, you got to figure out what the frequency is in the song. Well, how are you going to do that? Maybe you can pull up Audacity, load it into it. And if it's singled out, maybe there's no vocalist, no nothing else going on, you can say, oh, there's the rise at 62 hertz. What are you going to do about 62 hertz, right? So that's why I recommend using the Signal Gen app, because you can sweep that with your phone or with your finger and it'll go, woo, woo, and you sweep it back and forth and say, all right, this is about where it is. Now, can I do something about it? Or do I just have to be okay with 62 hertz being 70 degrees out of phase while everything else is pretty well locked and dialed in? And that's the hard part about trying to teach somebody through a video. And I think for stuff like that, honestly, if it were me, it would be so much easier to do that in person and to have somebody come in and sit. Hey, dude, listen, I'm gonna sweep this. Tell me what you hear. Would it sound like it's moving? You know, it's the same thing as time alignment, right? Like when I used to teach people about time alignment, I would shift the stage from side to side. And I would say, what does it sound like to you? I wouldn't tell them what to listen for. I would say, what does it sound like to you? And they would kind of give me flavors of what, and I'd say, okay, well, that's this thing. And now you've taught them something to listen for, and they can talk back to you, you idiot, not that kind of talk back, but they can say, you can have a conversation about what's going on and they can learn, but you can also get a better understanding of where their level of experience is at, what they're able to communicate, what they're okay with, because no system is ever going to be perfect. I mean, maybe if you were spending a whole lot of money, but you're going to have to give up something somewhere in audio. I mean, your room is always a factor. So the best you can hope for is just, I think, in my opinion, a good sit down session with somebody in person. And then the second best maybe would be for me to do a live stream where I set up a microphone in the living space and say, all right, we're watching live my adjustments in real time, and this is how I'm dialing it in. This is the phase wrap. This is when I go from 0 degrees to 180 degrees, and it wraps back around to 0 degrees. But there's a blip here at this frequency at 70 hertz. There's a bump there. Okay, well, that's a phase error. Now, is that in the crossover? Is that something I can do? Is that the room? Do I need an all pass filter? Do I need steeper slopes? Do I need an EQ band right there? It's overwhelming. It can easily be overwhelming. Anybody who tries to tell you that setting up a subwoofer is easy, they're partially right. It's easy if you're not listening for all the things that you should be listening for. But when you understand just how much it entails, then you realize how confusing it is. And note that I never said it was easy to set up a subwoofer in that budget or beginner's audiophile system video. I never said it was easy. I just said we're going to try to make things easier on you by using the app, by using this one band of EQ, and we're just going to focus on fixing the one thing that we can for now. And then later on, if you want to dive deeper into this stuff, by all means, let's do that. Okay. Let's see here. Uprise Intel. Hey, Aaron, love your channel. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any smaller boutique brands you have heard and recommend? Always wanted to buy some Fritz, but never heard of them. Any similar small brands you've heard? Man, there probably are, but they're small and I can't think of who they are right now. That's the problem. But if I do, as I'm talking, I'll come back to this question. But right now I'm like, I can't really think of any off the top. Any suggestion on DSPs that will perform reasonable with analog source turntable, for example? The mini DSPs are good. They're the other brand that is crazy expensive, and I've just forgotten their name. It's not Rain. Rain used to make pro audio DSPs that were, oh my gosh, but they quit that market a while back. What is that brand? I'll think of it later when I'm not trying to, but if I do remember it, I'll come back. But I think from now, a mini DSP would probably be a good place to start. You can also maybe use your computer if you had this stuff set up to a computer, but I'm guessing you probably don't. I'll have to think on it. Maybe some other people in the comment section have other suggestions. PS Audio is putting out speakers now. Do you think it will test any of their offerings? Yes, I actually have a pair of the PS Audio FR10s on hand. I have not set them up. I've got about 3 speakers that I have to review before I get to those. And then I've got the Kef Blade 2 Metas that I'm going to review as well. And actually, the JBL L52 Classics, I just created the video for it. And I've got to edit it today and then dump it out for my Patreons, hopefully this afternoon, tonight. And then I'll release it publicly sometime this upcoming week. But I appreciate it. I appreciate, I saw you said, thank you. Your channel's content is excellent. I appreciate that. So thank you very much. The Weam Streamer would work as a preamp to use with better, more powerful amps. I hear Weam will be coming out with a new streamer called Weam Ultimate, more inputs maybe in tone controls. Bet. Oh, that's my timer. I said 30 minutes, but I'll keep going. Yeah, honestly, I would like for Weam's Pro to have HDMI input. Basically, I want the Weam amp, but I don't need the amp. I just need HDMI input and XLR outputs to feed to separate amplifiers. That's what I would really like. Measurements for Revel M105, 106 versus 126 BE are very similar. Similar frequency, directivity, distortion, etc. Everyone says the BE is much more detailed. What explains the difference in the measurements? I don't know if I've seen. Well, I mean, I think I reviewed the 106, so let me go see. And I gotta say that I have that one. 105. No, I don't have that one. Okay, so without having seen the data, the answer is I don't know. I'm willing to bet that the data is different enough that would probably explain it off axis. And when they say more detailed, my guess is maybe a higher frequency extension, maybe a little bit of boost in the top end. Typically, detailed or resolution comes from a higher frequency boost. Not something that I care for, but that might be it. The other factor is, man, it could just be the fact that people are saying it's a beryllium dome tweeter, and therefore, by default, it has more detail or resolution. Because I've been sucked into that before. I've used ScanSpeak beryllium dome tweeters for years, and I think they sound fantastic. I don't know that I'd ever call them more detailed. I think they just do a better job with higher frequency extension, and that's the reason that I personally like them. And also, I think they have higher sensitivity in general. I think beryllium dome typically have higher sensitivity. Here's a good question, Aaron. How do you plan which products to review? I don't really, there's not really a method to the madness here. Some stuff I will seek on purpose, like this Weam amp. I sought this one out because of what I said in the video yesterday, where I wanted to be able to say, hey, if you're on a budget, then you can buy this thing. It has EQ built in. Then you can go out and buy these budget-minded speakers that have issues, but with proper equalization, they can be made to sound fantastic. And then now you've got a nice system for $500 to $1,000. That's one example. Other examples are personal interest, like the Kef Blade 2 Meta. I basically begged to review that one. Finally got a pair to review, and that's not a shot at Kef. I mean, it took me a while before I was able to get a pair of those. So I'm excited to review those. Let's see here. Trying to think of other stuff that I reviewed more recently. So, for example, these L52 Classics, my friend Napier Lopez, who is a fellow reviewer, he actually reached out to me and asked if I would want to review them. And I said, sure, like I'm interested in them. I listen to a lot of feedback. So people will ask, hey, will you review this, this, or this? And a lot of the times what I'll do is if I get enough of those requests, then I'll email the manufacturer and ask if I can review it, or I'll see if I can find somebody that has it. Or sometimes maybe I will buy it myself to review. I'm probably not buying any speakers to review myself for a very long time anymore. I would encourage that if you are interested in me reviewing something, that you just annoy the heck out of the manufacturers. I've had 3 manufacturers in the last month that I've tried to reach out to that they just don't reply to me anymore. And I don't really get it. You know, Tecton is one that I sent an email to in 2023, I think. No, hold on. 2022. I think it was July 1st. I emailed them, and I know this because this recently came up in a group chat with on my Facebook group page. Somebody posted the Tecton speakers and said, asked about them, and then somebody said, "Oh, it'd be cool if you would review them." So I had emailed Tecton July 1st, I believe it was, of 2022, kind of laid my case out. Hey, my name is Aaron Harrison. I do objective oriented reviews, blah, 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 blah. And they said, yeah, it sounds interesting. I'm paraphrasing. It sounds interesting. Let's touch base after the holiday, July 4th. Cool. I emailed them a week after July 4th and again at the end of July that year. Didn't get a reply. I emailed them in May of last year. I didn't get a reply. So that's an example of a brand that, like, it seems like things are going to be going all right. And then I just nothing. And it's weird. I don't really understand that. I'd be cool if brands would just say, we're not interested. Wilson Audio is a brand that I've reached out to. ATC is a brand that I've reached out to, and I'm not getting a reply back in a while from ATC. So maybe I need to follow up on that. The Emotiva stuff that's coming out soon, I've emailed about that, and I think that I'm going to be getting a pair of those. I emailed about the SVS, new SVS speakers to Nick Brown at SVS, and I should probably get a pair because SVS has always been pretty good about loaning me stuff to review. Even though I haven't had the greatest things to say about some of the speakers, they sent it anyway, and I really dig that. So that's kind of how I plan stuff. It's whatever I'm interested in at the time, whatever you all are interested in, or maybe if somebody offers something up. I will also say that I don't like to buy speakers knowing that I'm only testing them and then I'm going to return them. I don't like doing that personally. But if you guys want to order something and have it drop shipped to me, then let me know because I'm more than happy to test things and review things out that way. That way I have had people do that because they say, I'm interested in this thing, but I really would like to see the data on it. And I can't find that data. If I order it from Crutchfield or Amazon or whatever, can I just have it shipped to you and you test it? And if it looks all right, then I'm going to keep it. And if it doesn't, then I'll just send it back. And that's worked out pretty well so far. If you guys want to do that, y'all just let me know. Just shoot me an email. Let's see here. I'm going to have to scroll down a little bit. Aaron's Audio Corner. Why do KEF speakers have the depth of field and enveloping effect that not other wide dispersion speakers like JBL, Synthesis, HDI, or narrower coaxials like JTR don't in the same room? I don't know the answer to that, right? And this is the thing that annoys people. You don't know anything. No, I'm just being honest. Like, I don't know that there is an answer to that. My opinion, one of two things. One is sided bias. Okay. Maybe three things. Two is step response. Is the tweeter truly in line with the mid-range? And if so, does that time difference basically not being there, the fact that the tweeter and the mid-range are so closely aligned, does that actually improve the depth of stage in the recording? Like when you're listening back to it? Possibly. I think I've said it probably does. I know that in my experience, when using time alignment to align a tweeter to a mid, that you can it certainly sounds like there's more cohesiveness, more coherency in the soundstage and things just kind of align better. Maybe that's sided bias. I don't know. The third thing is the fact that it is a true point source. It's a really good true point source. So KEF I said earlier, I think that KEF does a really good job with their coaxials. And that's why most of the time I have no problem recommending anything that KEF makes. I'm just genuinely impressed by their product engineering, not even the design or anything, just the engineering that goes into their drive units. They do a really good job of aligning that tweeter dispersion to the mid-range dispersion because the mid-range is basically the horn. It's the waveguide at that point. It doesn't sound shouty. There is no discontinuity. And the other thing is that a lot of, let's take an example like Seos Seas. Let me pull up theirs. Coaxial. That'll be a good one to look at. Oh, that's a really good one to look at. Open a new tab. Gosh. Okay. This is a driver by Seos Seas if you're a dumb American. But see how this edge, there's this lip here of this tweeter? That's bad. That's going to be a diffraction element. So the halfway from here and then back here is going to create a null. And then, well, maybe not the halfway, but the distance between here and here is going to cancel out as it shoots out toward you. And then it's going to create a null. And then there's going to be a peak effect and another null effect. Now, in an ideal world, this is very, very smooth out. Let me see if I can find another example. Let's do KEF. Drivers here. Oh, look, Aaron's Audio Corner, KEF Q100 drive unit. Hey, I recognize this guy. Look, hey, it's on my website. See how there's actually like a wave-guided housing around that tweeter, and then it connects to the mid-range. There's no major step. Let me see if I have a better picture. No, I don't. Not right there. There's no major step like there is with that Seos. See that big step? That's a problem. Now, whether or not that problem is audible is something that I will leave to the research experts. If you guys want to do blind testing on that, have at it. But there is certainly a measurable difference in the response on axis and off axis. And I believe that that actually translates into a difference in sound. Some of those tweeter housing to mid-range alignments are better than others. So I just gave you a good example of the KEF and maybe a poor example of the Seos. And then there's everything in between. I mean, if you go look at, let me see here. Something like this. See that? That's a horn tweeter. It's a coaxial driver, but it's a horn tweeter. Now, there's no way that that horn is aligning its radiation pattern well with that mid-range. It's just not going to do it. I mean, maybe with the proper crossover point, you can get it good, but it's not going to be as nominal as something like this would be. And the other thing to consider too is that this out here, the surround, is also part of the waveguide. Well, that was neat. Hey, so the smoother that step from the mid-range to the surround is, the better that speaker, that coaxial is going to be. And so for that reason, the KEF Q series with that, I can't remember what they call this. Let me see if I got it right down here. Is it Z Flex or something like that? I can't remember now, but they have a specific term for, oh, here we go. It's a better picture. See how smoothly integrated the housing of that tweeter is to the mid-range? But this right here, that little step is also going to create a bit of a continuity mismatch. And our 300, got a review of this as well. Blow this up. So these are older drivers, but this is from the R300, R500 series. See how that mid-range surround right here is much more smooth, so it aligns better with the wave-guided portion of that mid-range. That actually makes a difference as well. And this is why I say that KEF does a really good job with the coaxials, because not all coaxials are created equal. I just showed you the Seos and the BNC that they're not going to behave as well as the KEF does. So I think that that kind of goes back into tandem with the conversation of having a better point source, not necessarily just in time with syncing that tweeter up with the mid-range, but also in the dispersion characteristics, allowing you to use maybe a more simple crossover, or maybe just getting closer to a more ideal polar response compared to something like the Seos, where you've got that little edge going around the tweeter. And you see that with other coaxials. That's why I tend to prefer KEF coaxials. Genelec does a really good job as well. Tanoia is one I see brought up, but Tanoia has some pretty rough looking coaxials as well. So personally, and I don't know all of them that are out there, but personally, I put KEF and Genelec coaxials as kind of like the top tier coaxial. I'm about to have to head out, I think, but I want to jump through some of these super chats. I don't miss any of those. A $5 super chat from Ryan English. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that, man. Is there any specific spec or measurement I can read to know how much clarity and detail the speaker might have? So I don't know that there's going to be a specific measurement. I really think you should probably look at them as the whole. Some people might disagree with me here, and that's okay, but this is just kind of where I'm coming from. low distortion is one, but let's assume that you're listening at lower volume and you're not really cranking it up. So you're not really exceeding the capability in terms of output of the speaker. Neutrality is key for me. And neutrality is what gives me, what you got? Clarity and detail. Other reviewers and other people in general will often cite detail as well. They'll often use the word detail or resolution, but typically what I find when you measure those speakers is that they have boosted treble. And I don't like that. That bothers me. Just that boosted treble just bothers me, and I can pick up on it pretty quickly. I prefer a speaker that's more neutral, on axis, off axis. And that's why I say there's not a measurement, but you need a set of measurements. And then something like the polar response, the directivity graphics, what you're really looking for there is neutrality. You don't want a lot of peaks and deeps. You don't want a lot of peaks and dips. You don't want boosted treble. You don't want bloated mid bass or a single one note mid bass. You don't want resonances smack dab in the middle in the mid range because of a cabinet resonance. You want smooth response. And I'll just be honest, I think something like this March audio that I just reviewed, I mean, it's on my brain right now because I just reviewed it. It does all of those things extremely well. Look at the response here on the speaker. It's pretty dang flat. It's within like 1.5 decibels on axis, but its off axis response, its early direct reflections, directivity are really smooth. I mean, this bump right here is due to the tweeter and the mid range distance. So that's a vertical directivity thing. But yeah, the estimated interim response looks really dang good. That versus something like, let's see, Martin Logan. Yeah. Okay. This is the response of the Martin Logan XTB 100. And when I went back after doing my measurements, my listening, and I wanted to see what other reviewers and people were saying, I saw a lot of people saying it has resolution and detail. But look at that. I mean, if we go back and look at the on axis response with a little line through it to help me. Average sensitivity is around 87 decibels. You're +3 of that at 2 kilohertz. And then just like there's a bump, there's 3 dB bump at 2 kilohertz. And then you're 5 dB at about 12 kilohertz above the average sensitivity. That to me is not a neutral speaker. It's not a detail speaker. It's just a bright speaker. So I'm looking for a speaker that is more neutral, more linear on axis, smooth off axis response. DB Photo, what's up, man? FYI, function generator is an excellent signal test tone generator for Android. So that's good. For anybody using Android, go check out function generator. The one that I mentioned earlier is just called Signal Gen, and that's iOS. I don't know if they make that for Android. What is my opinion on brands that only do very high-end stuff, such as Magico or Wilson Audio? I've heard some Wilson. I think I've heard of Magico, but my brain escapes me on which one that was now. I don't really have an overall opinion about them offering only high-end stuff or costly stuff. I've reached out to Wilson Audio to ask about some of their lower end speakers, and they're still like 10 or 15,000 bucks. But I would be personally interested in reviewing those. The one that from Magico, I'm gonna get rid of some of this stuff real fast. No, not Magico, sorry, Wilson. Wilson Audio. I think I may have talked about this in my last video. I'm interested in this guy, the Sabrina. I say this guy, Sabrina. I think that's not a guy name. I'm so funny. All right. They have other pictures of it like that. Like that. Specifications, manual. Anyway, it's a 3-way speaker and tweeter, mid-range, mid-bass, all aligned pretty well vertically. There's no huge space difference between those. And I'm thinking that looks like a really good design. It should sound really good. And then they have other ones like Yvette. That one looks pretty cool too. They've got some different stuff going on. The build quality on these, though, having seen them in person, is second to none. The Magico, having seen those in person too, is pretty impressive. I don't necessarily know that you're getting better sound having paid more for those speakers, and you do get better build quality. But at some point, it's perfectly okay to pay extra money for something that looks better, is constructed better, is constructed by hand in a factory in the United States of America, if that's what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with paying more for something that maybe doesn't sound 10 times better, but it might cost more money if you've got that knowledge. If you understand that I'm not paying for better sound, I'm paying for better build quality, or I'm paying for a brand that for some reason I want to get behind. For example, Macintosh. I think that's a good example of something that I have personal experience with. They meet their specs, they do extremely well overall sound quality. Can lower cost stuff perform as good or better? Sure. Are you going to be excited about that lower cost stuff? You might not be. Are you going to be able to get your money's worth if you have to resell some of that lower cost stuff later? Probably not. But in the end, it probably doesn't matter because you still saved yourself thousands of dollars by not buying Macintosh. But still, it doesn't take away from the fact that Macintosh, A, makes a good product, and B, makes a good product that looks good, at least to me, and the build quality is second to none. I mean, they're like 120 pounds for some of their two-channel amplifiers. Some of you may not care about that, and that's fine. Okay, let me see here. I know I have to skip a lot of your questions here, but I really do need to be heading out soon. Compare the COS coaxial that you used to the BMS in regards to high frequency mid woofer cone interface. Yeah, so the reason I chose that BMS is because out of the pro audio coaxial drivers, at least at the time, this was like 2016 or 17 or so, that was the best one that I could find. Chana, Techno Dad, supporting my dude over here. He has no clue I'm here. I do now, man. What's up, dude? How about the HSU CCB8? Yeah, so I've actually looked at trying to get that one. I've been questioned a lot about testing that and reviewing it, but if anybody wants to send them to me, I'd be happy to give them a shot. I was actually going to buy them myself last year, but they were out of stock, and I am not spending any more money on speakers my own, at least for a while. Oh, they're still out of stock, or are they? Am I looking at the wrong thing? No, they're in stock. So if anybody wants to see a review on these HSU SU CCB8, let me know. I'd be happy to give them a shot. B&W 800 series speakers, clipple test results would be great to see. Yep, I agree. And that's another case of where you guys would probably need to reach out. So the thing with some of these manufacturers is that they think that the audience that I cater to doesn't really care about higher expense stuff. And we all know that that's not true, but I just don't have a lot of expensive speakers that I've tested because they're just not really that accessible, honestly. But I'm changing that. You know, I'm working on getting in more stuff and trying to flip that on its head so where I can test everything from $100 to $30,000. And the Kef Blade 2 Metas are about 29 grand a pair. PS Audio FR10s are 10 grand a pair. So I'm working on expanding the things that I review and test, and that helps all of us. It gives me a better appreciation for maybe lower cost speakers, but also at the same time allows me to get hands on with some stuff that has extremely good build quality and sounds fantastic as well. I know that some of you are not really interested in the stuff that costs maybe over $1,000, but then there's a lot of you who are. And so I try to cover all bases, and I also try to stick to what I'm interested in as well, so I can keep it fun for me too. Aaron, have you heard about Epic Subwoofers? Recently got one of their dual 15-inch sealed for free. Amp is dead though. Epic Sub. Why does that sound familiar? Epic Subwoofer. No, I don't believe so. I'm looking online right now. There's a thread from AVS forum. Epic Subwoofers out of business that was started in 2013. So yeah, maybe I'm not familiar with it, or maybe I've just heard of it. And there's an official subwoofer thread that's still going in 2023. That's interesting. Okay. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Let's see here. Make sure I didn't miss any super chats or anything. I'm probably gonna have to head out for a second. In a second. I'll just throw out real fast that I am. Oh, have you seen this One Man's Dream, Ken Fritz documentary? I did, and then I read the article about how his kids basically split everything up and sold it all off, piece parted, and I thought, man, that kind of sucks. But people are crazy with their hobbies, man. I mean, that dude had over $1 million in that system and built a whole room around it. More power to you, dude. If that's what you want to do, when you busted your butt in life and you've earned the ability to do the things that you want, regardless if the people think they're crazy or not, screw them. Do what you want and enjoy it. Enjoy the fruits of your labor. I tell you what, I don't want to be retired at 60 and not being able to do anything. So if I go out and I buy something crazy, then I'm doing it because I want to. Because, man, dude, I might not make it to next year. Who knows? I may get hit by a bus tomorrow. Hopefully not, but you never know. If you've got the means at the time, and let's assume that you're smart with retirement, then screw what everybody else says and enjoy what you're doing, man. And that goes for everything. Okay, I think I'm gonna split. I will talk to you all later. Keep an eye out for the JBL L52 review that's coming out soonish. It'll be on Patreon, hopefully today. And then I've got some ELAC Vera, I can't remember now, bookshelves that are coming up that are pretty cool. A little bit of an issue around 1K or so that I noticed. I'll have to look at the data to see what's going on there, but they're pretty cool. And then some PSB Audio Imagine T65 towers that are pretty cool. And then I'll be ready to go on to the big boys, the PS Audio FR10 and the KEF Blade 2 Meta. And those are going to be pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited. I haven't even listened to them yet. So I'm really excited to get those in and hook them up. Oh, and I've also got the NAD C3050 integrated amp coming up for review, which that thing is awesome. So keep an eye out for that too. And I will talk to you all later. I hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday. Take care. Peace.